Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Film Frauds. For myself, Matt, and my co-host, the one and only Tyler,
Hello.
who provide our completely unprofessional, 100% biased opinions on movies of today, tomorrow, and yesteryear. And today is part one of what will probably be a three-part series in which we talk about the Hobbit movies in conjunction with the Lord of the Rings movies. And Mark's also not here today because he doesn't want to watch 18 hours of Middle Earth movies. I can't imagine why.
Yeah.
Can you imagine why, Tyler?
I can't, but we asked him like a week and a half ago, like, do you want to be in this Hobbit episode? And we're like, you just have
Yeah.
to watch the Hobbit movies. And he went, I don't want to do it. I don't have enough
Honestly,
time.
I think I'd rather watch these six movies again than watch
There
Night
it
of the
comes.
Hunter one more time.
Oh, wow. I was honestly expecting a Black Hat dig right there.
And Black Cat's even worse, but
Yeah. You would honestly rather watch. So you're like, you have to sit through 18 hours of this.
yeah.
Well, okay. Quick question, real quick before we start. What would you rather watch, Black Hat or Battle of the Five Armies?
Oh, Battle of the Five Armies.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll get to that in our
Easy.
third episode.
Yeah.
So yeah, I figured I was very curious about like how we really do this, and I really want to just kind of first start off by kind of like framing what like the production development, because everyone who's probably listening to this knows about Lord of the Rings, has a history of it, and I figured I just
Yeah.
kind of want to frame it. Then we can talk about kind of like what the movies mean to us to
Mm.
establish that things can be criticized. But we'll get to that in a second. So basically, I just wanted to really emphasize the fact that like 1997 came along, and Peter Jackson was not the biggest director out there.
No.
He actually wasn't a big director really in any regards. He had just got done working on The Frighteners, was a movie that came out in 1997.
He did a lot of like gory movies.
Yeah,
I
like
haven't seen them, but they're like, I don't know, like exploitation is the right word, but it's like gory, like low budget
yeah,
films.
B movie, gory horror movies.
Yeah.
But he had planned in starting 1997, wanted to do kind of like the Sword and Stone epic adventure movie. And he began to kind of like draft these ideas, and he found that no matter what he did, it always became way too similar to Lord of the Rings and Tolkien's like original books. So then he kind of came up with the idea, and there's this long like legal battle for the rights and stuff like that to create the Lord of the Rings movies. And ultimately, he started planning this movie in 1997, and then the original movie was released. This movie first started filming in 1999 to 2000. All three of them filmed in that one sequential year, which is impressive knowing how well these movie looks and the
Yeah.
fact that like they spent 2001 to 2004 doing reshoots, but they kind of, they filmed all their stuff, and for basically everything's really incredible during that 1 year period. But it's basically the first movie, Fellowship of the Ring, came out in December 19th of 2001. It was met with such, I had no idea how like critically and commercially acclaimed these movies were. So what do you think the budget was for like all these movies around? Did you look that up?
No, I didn't look it up for the first movie.
For all of them, rather, because they all have the
Combined.
same exact budget.
Oh, so
If you just look at these movies, what would you expect the budget to be
I would
on?
say like 100 million at least.
It was 93 million, and then the sequel said 94.
Yeah.
With her inflation for about 2020 would be around 142 million dollars. So if that puts things into perspective, for how great these movies look and feel, and how long they are,
And how limited the technology was
exactly
19 years ago.
Yeah, and the fact that was one able they look as good as they do on such a small budget is incredible. This movie made $888 million at the box office. The first one did, which is astounding.
Yeah.
It made $315 million domestically and about $570 million internationally. And the low split of domestic to foreign, basically because of what we see now with like movies grossing 200 million here and 800 million foreign or internationally, it's kind of incredible. But that's not just it. The movie, The Fellowship of the Rings, how many Oscars do you know this was nominated for? How
I
many do
know
you
Return
think?
of the King swept the Oscars, but
Yep.
I'm gonna say this was nominated for like 8, and there's probably a lot of technical stuff.
This was nominated for 13 awards.
Whoa.
Yeah. And it won.
Jeez.
Okay. So it won for 4, which was Best Cinematography, Best Special Effects, Best Makeup, Best Original Score. Makes sense. It was nominated for Best Actor in a Supporting Role, Ian McKellen.
Mm.
Best Art
Oh, wow,
Direction.
Ian McKellen got nominated.
He got
That's
nominated for
great.
this. Best Art Direction, Director, Film Editing, Original Song, Best Picture, Best Sound, Costume Design, and Best Adapted Screenplay. We hear a lot about like the Return of the King sweeping the Oscars, but I
Yeah.
had no idea that Fellowship of the Ring was nominated for so much, which is just incredible. But not only that, it was met with incredible critical acclaim, 91% by critics on Rotten Tomatoes, 95% by audience. Doesn't really mean a lot, but it kind of gives you an indication. Two Towers comes out next year, does even better at the box office, 943 million, does better domestically. It only gets 6 nominations, and it won 2. It won in visual effects and sound editing. It was nominated for picture, art direction, film editing, and sound. 2003 comes along, Return of the King, may be one of the biggest movies ever. It grossed over $1 billion, grossed more domestically than its predecessors. It was met with the lowest audience acclaim, 86% on Rotten Tomatoes, which I find interesting, and then won and absolutely demolished the major awards. 11 nominations and 11 wins, which is tied for the most Academy wins of all time with Titanic and Ben-Hur. It was also the first fantasy movie to ever win the Academy Award for Best Picture. Incredible stuff. It's absolutely baffling that we had a trilogy like this that was just met with so much acclaim and success, and they backed it up. But that's also
especially based off of a fantasy series. Like how many epic fantasy movies can you think of that came out in the 90s or the 2000s that came out before Lord of the Rings? Like Never-Ending Story, but that's more of a kids films. And then after you get Harry Potter, you get Narnia, Aragon, and then eventually Game of Thrones. So Lord of the Rings is very much like the kickstart to diving into more not necessarily adult fantasy, but mature fantasy.
Yeah, and it's honestly like I was thinking about this movie, and I think these movies came out at the absolute perfect time. And I think if they come out even 5 years after, I don't think they work as well as they do. And the reason is we were hitting that time, at least in the mid 2000s, where we had that weird 2000s era where everyone put this heavy emphasis on bad CGI because it was like this breaking kind of like new ground. Like, what could we do with computer effects?
Like The Matrix kind of started that. Yeah.
The Matrix started that, but then you hit like the Matrix ripoff and all these like awkward CGI movies from 2000s, mid 2000s and on. And I feel like if we make this movie 5 years, we don't get a lot of those practical kind of like effects because there are so many shots in these movies of the orc army and they're smaller in scale, but they're people and they're in practical effects and they're in makeup. And if this movie comes out 5 years earlier, they don't have the technology. And if this movie comes out, say now, you're going to see a lot of like the studio interference happening, which you're seeing with like a lot of the Marvel movies where they all kind of feel the same and they're good. I like the Marvel movies.
They'd be afraid to first of all be as slow as they are, like kicking up as slow as they are, and they'd be afraid of because a lot of the Marvel movies are put in quips and just to like acknowledge how kind of absurd things are. Like Lord of the Rings very much is a very serious trilogy, and I think that part of what makes it so great is that it sticks to the serious tone, other than character moments in which like there's like lightheartedness, but I feel like studios would encourage them to have probably a bigger romance plot, and also to be more funny and unnecessarily funny. Like there'd be like a scene, I don't know, where like they talk about like other orcs are like talking about like eating fast food or something.
It's one of those things. We probably get some weird product placement, even though I don't know how that's possible. But it's one of those things where it's like, I think because this trilogy ends, and the Hobbit movies are a prequel, and so that's kind of its own separate entity, which we'll eventually talk about right here. But the movie ends and it's a bow, and that's it. We don't. There is, and I feel like we would there. I feel like my issue if they were to come out now, and they weren't. So this is all again hypothetical and things like that. But it would have been they would have left room at the end to potentially continue on because they would have seen, oh my God, these movies made $3 billion basically. How do we what do we do? We can't.
That or they lead into spin-off series like Gimli and Legolas would be like well, we got to go to the mines of Moria.
Yeah,
we'll see you guys later, and they would have had their own separate journey. It would have been Legolas and Gimli take Moria or something like that.
That's actually a really good point. That is a perfect. We should have pitched that idea. Why don't we do it now?
Wait, cut this.
Go pause it all.
I'll talk to Warner Bros.
I don't know. Ultimately, that's kind of where we wanted to frame where these movies were coming from.
Yeah.
What's your history with Lord of the Rings before we get to the Hobbit movies?
So just in general, like I'm a huge Lord of the Rings movie fan, not necessarily the books.
Okay.
I watched the movies when I was younger, like in like late elementary school, like 5th, 6th grade, and was like, this is the best ever. This is like the coolest stuff ever. And it really got me into the fantasy genre. Like, I I was a big Legolas fan when I was younger, and
Ooh.
ever since then, like every fantasy character I make is like an archer of some sort,
Oh
like
my
in
god.
Skyrim or yeah, Ghost of Tsushima. You have bow and arrow stuff as well. I just love using bow and arrows now in video games because of that. And I was never really a big Harry Potter fan either because I just always view that as like the lesser Lord of the Rings
Yep.
because
The
it's like
Hobbit movies?
no, the Harry Potter,
Harry Potter, yes.
because like it always came off to me as inferior to Lord of the Rings, and that was kind of like the Lord of the Rings movies represent like the peak of fantasy on like the big screen until Game of Thrones came out in the early 2010s. So I'm a huge Lord of the Rings movie fan. I read The Fellowship of the Ring, and I read The Hobbit first, and I think The Hobbit short story is amazing. I think it's really great.
Short story. It's a full novel.
Oh, it's like a novella, right?
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's almost 300 pages. It's an
Is it
actual
really?
book. Yeah.
Okay. Um, I love that. And then I read The Fellowship, and I was like, this is really boring. I like the movie a lot more.
Yep.
And then I haven't bothered reading any of the books since because they're just too long. It's like, why would I do that when I can just watch movies?
Yeah. There is so yeah, it's a very interesting kind of like thing like that. And I found this really great quote from Roger Ebert, who's only great when he's proving our points, and when he's
Yeah.
not proving our points, we don't care about him.
Yeah.
In his review for the Fellowship of the Ring, which I believe he gave 3 stars. Oh no, I lost. Oh, here we go. He says Peter Jackson, the New Zealand director, hey Boston,
Yeah.
who masterminded this film.
Peter Jackson.
Peter Jackson, a. So Peter Jackson, the New Zealand director masterminded this film, has made a work for and of our times. It will be embraced, I suspect, by many Tolkien fans and take on aspects of a cult. Basically called how these movies will age.
Yeah.
So I grew up, I didn't really watch these movies until I got into high school. I didn't really
You
know like
hated him.
I knew I was waiting for that to happen. I didn't hate them, but when I watched them in high school, I went, okay, like they're really good, and then that's it. And they didn't like spark this lasting cultural impact on me like they did with you. And I think ultimately that has to come from the fact that how like I got into movies and they're like, these are the gold standard for basically movies. And I went, okay, sure. And people had grown up with them like you did. And I went, okay. And I watched them and I was like, they're really good. And then, the Hobbit movies come out, and the Hobbit movies are the Hobbit movies. And we'll talk about that more. And then that's really it. And I've only seen them once before. And so rewatching all of them now, and I was surprised at how much I just kind of love them and really
Yeah.
appreciated them, considering now we've gotten more into like our movie phase, I guess, in our lives and our movie fans kind of appreciation in an era where these kind of movies are null and void, that we don't have these like very passionate, big Hollywood blockbusters that don't feel like they're a product of a larger system. And so I rewatching these, I was just mesmerized. Like, man, I really wish I would have had more of an impact on me as I wish these would have had a bigger impact on me as a child. And I watched them when I was younger. That being said, because of that, I'm not a giant, like, I can recognize if things aren't perfect.
Yeah.
Which is a really kind of nice non-bias to have. I wasn't really like, I don't view these from rose-colored
This is Film
glasses.
Project where we provide completely unprofessional
Yeah.
and 100% biased opinions.
Absolutely.
Tyler.
Yes, I'm sorry. So these movies suck and I hate them.
Yeah.
No, so I can very much look at them from like a rose-colored glasses, or not from a rose-colored glasses, and see like, there's some issues, not like nothing that's like giant in any capacity. I mean, I gave all these movies 5 stars on Letterboxd, and
Yeah.
if that like
Movies can have 5 stars while also acknowledging they have problems.
yeah, and I mean, if it's one of those things like some movies,
like I think like Prometheus has so many logical problems with it, but I gave it 5 stars. I think it's basically, in my opinion, a masterpiece, and I can
exactly.
you can the good can outweigh the bad.
And like, again, I put like a very tentative ranking, and my ranking might change as we talk about them. It's also hard to rank these movies, but like we'll get to this in our third episode. Like Return of the King, I love, but I have some slight issues with it, and it's nothing that will detract the movie from any way. It's not going to stop me from rewatching it. So I just wanted to kind of recognize and put forward our spot, because I know people are diehard fans of these, and we don't want to we say anything besmirching about the movies in any capacity.
Yeah.
Just know that we do love this world and love these movies. The Lord of the Rings, that is, I should clarify. So, Matt.
So that being said.
Yeah, that being said, that was a nice, very tandem. This is going to be a long series.
Yeah. We're going to get into The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey.
Yeah. Matt, when was the first time you saw this? Really?
I saw this in theaters with my cousin John, who you know. But like we were both really big into Lord of the Rings. We played Skyrim a lot, so we like he as well. Like this is early high school for us,
Yep.
and like super big into the fantasy genre at the time. And this is the first time I think I read the book of something before watching the movie, like
Wow.
purposefully.
Yep.
So I read the Hobbit book before going to the movie, and I was so excited. And I saw it, and I was like, "Oh, that was pretty good."
Yep.
And I've seen it like on TV, like in passing
Yep.
since then. But I think this is because I just like as background as to why we started this. I got HBO Max, and it has all the Lord of the Rings and Hobbit movies on there. And
Yep.
just on my own, I wanted to rewatch all of them in order. And
Yep.
then Tyler, the wacky he is,
Yes,
decided
I
to
am.
latch onto it, and so he started watching movies as well. So for the purpose of this video, and so I rewatched the Hobbit Journey, and this is the only one of the three movies where my opinion has kind of stayed the same.
Mm.
I think this movie is pretty solid. I think that going back to like a movie having problems, you can also you can acknowledge the problems in the movie while also still liking it. I think the third act of this movie is pretty great. Um,
Wow.
Honestly, I do think it's pretty great. It doesn't come near to the Lord of the Rings movies, but I think that it picks up a lot of the slack of the beginning and the middle have, because there are so many stretched scenes which don't really feel that long by comparison of Desolation of Smaug and Battle of the Five Armies, which you'll see later on.
Yep.
But there are so many scenes that are just dragged beyond reason. But I think the ending, like the fight with the in the Goblin Cave and the riddles in the dark sequences, are just so great in my opinion.
Yeah.
And Bilbo's character arc, to the movie's benefit, but to the trilogy's deficit, is complete in this one movie. Um, so yeah, I would say this movie's pretty solid. What did you think of it? And what
So
is your
the
history with Unexpected Journey?
so the reason I actually watched this movie was because I saw you're like, I'm gonna rewatch the Hobbit movies. I'm like, that's a cool idea. I don't really feel like dealing with it though, honestly. And then you watched it and you give it 4 stars on Letterboxd. I'm like, damn, I remember I've seen The Hobbit twice. I saw it once in theaters, and then I rewatched it when I was in early high school because I bought the Blu-ray on like a Black Friday. They went there for like $6, and I watched it again in high school. And both those times, I'm like, it's not bad. Like I didn't really like, I wasn't thinking it was anything special, but I remember being like, I think it's a lot of flack that it doesn't deserve. And you rewatch it and you give it 4 stars. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna check it out. I haven't seen it in like 6, 7, 8 years.
Yeah.
6 years. Last time I saw it was before Battle of Five Armies, in 2014. And I rewatched it and I was very surprised at how much I didn't like it. Honestly. This entire trilogy has really soured for me over time, and it's a very interesting it's very like an interesting kind of like argument for why I don't like this. And I want to try to avoid comparing it to the book as much as I can, because those issues, the things with the books, are very kind of like well known and well documented, in the fact that like Guillermo del Toro was going to set to direct it and he was only going to make 2 movies, with the first one being a large portion of the book and the second movie acting as a connection, both stylistically and tonally, to the Lord of the Rings movies. He's basically wanted his first movie to be by itself, and then the second one be a connecting line. And then he left because of creative differences or scheduling or whatever, because it was taking too long. And then Peter Jackson came in and had like half a year to prepare at best, even if that, maybe from multiple accounts. And I really struggle with this movie a lot in a bunch of different capacities. And I think it really has to do with the tone of this movie. And I don't dislike children's movies, but I don't necessarily care for movies in a universe drastically altering in tone. It would be it's a weird thing where, if like, and I hate to use a Marvel movie as an example, but the Marvel movies, if you go from something, what? If you go from something like, my understanding of how I view this movie is like, if Avengers Infinity War happened and it's tonally dark and the heroes, spoilers, lose at the end, and then if Avengers Endgame came out and it was kind of like a little children's kiddies movie to me, and things were just kind of sillier and tonally didn't really take itself seriously, and it feels like this jarring kind of example. And again, I understand this is a lighter book than the Lord of the Rings saga. I've read it too. I've read it in like freshman year of high school. It's been a long time since I've read it. But there are just too many aspects of a children's movie in this for me. And I think it has to do a lot of like in-world logic. And again, I'll explain it more and better, but these characters are invincible, and I feel no danger or no threat to anyone or anything in this movie, which is really difficult when they're trying to very much put these characters in escalating situations of danger, when I know it's very I should clarify, it's very difficult to take things seriously when, spoiler alert, they're in a scene with the in the orcs cave and they're falling down like mountains on little like log things, and they land and they're fine, and the giant troll falls on them, and it's very hard to take the next scene where the danger's falling off a cliff a little bit
Yeah.
seriously. It's kind of like these things are like a little bit of messes, and what we want to do with the series is kind of talk about why these work and don't work, and use the Lord of the Rings movies as kind of like a framework, because those movies do work. Um, I I also think this movie has a big character issue. Outside of Bilbo and Thorin, there are no characters in this movie. There are no
Gandalf.
Gandalf is an interesting aspect, and I actually really wanted to ask you about this. Gandalf is an established character because of Lord of the Rings. If you don't
Yeah.
know anything about the Lord of the Rings movies and you start with The Hobbit, Gandalf is not an established character in this movie. Did
Uh,
do you agree or disagree
no,
with
I
that?
disagree.
You disagree? Okay.
Because you get enough of his character because of first how he is sort of manipulative, how he puts
Mm,
like the marking on built on the door of
yep.
Hobbit Hole, and then all the dwarves come. So like he's kind of a guy who just gets what he wants, who's not afraid to like stretch the truth to get what he wants. And then there's like the great scene where everyone's doubting Bilbo as a burglar, and
Yep.
all like the darkness comes. He goes, "Oh, you gotta be nice to Bilbo."
Yeah.
Like I don't know. I feel like you can tell that maybe his character isn't as developed as it is in Lord of the Rings, but I feel like you can tell that based on Ian McKellen's performance
Yeah.
and his interactions with Bilbo, that one, he cares about Bilbo and he like understands like the gravity of the
Mm.
situation that he's taking him on.
No,
Um,
I can't. Again, this one is purely like an opinion. I can't disagree with anything you said.
yeah,
I just found myself watching it and going, I wish they did more to set him up, because if I had never heard of the Lord of the Rings, I'd be very like perplexed as to who this character is. But you do bring up some good points. I do have a quick question about this, and I may have missed this in a watching of it. Why is Bilbo picked? They never like. Do they ever actively say?
well, hobbits are smaller and they're quiet. Um, so it's like the point of being a burglar is that you get to be, stealthily.
Is
And I
the
think like he has his family legacy. Because I remember his like great uncle
mm,
was like killed an orc and like hit his head off. A goblin hit his head off, and that's how golf was invented.
yep,
So I think there's familial ties, and like I think Bilbo knows Gandalf
yeah.
before the start of the movie as well.
There was I think there's a few things. I there were a few times in the movie where I'm like, I don't really understand his importance. And this his importance is ultimately felt in the second movie and third movie more. Because this is very much his character arc. So he spends a large portion of the movie kind of being useless a little bit. And I get that's his character arc, but when he's useless and the movie's telling you he's important, and you're waiting kind of for that to happen, and then it happens in the third act, kind of is like one of those things like, okay, like sure, I guess it didn't, again, it's not a big detractor of the movie, but I really kind of was a little bit like like it just didn't feel like that. I don't
Yeah.
know, like I also think this movie is an exercise in excess.
Yeah, especially in the very first scene where Frodo is in like three different scenes. It's like you think like you have a little nostalgic throwback of having Bilbo like seeing like watching Frodo watching Bilbo like read his book and laughing and walking away. It's like, oh, that's
Yep.
like the one shot you're gonna get of Frodo and that'll be it. That'll be
Yep.
good. But no, you get like three scenes with him talking. And then they literally have to build up to hits like literally the first scene in Fellowship where he goes to see Gandalf.
Yep.
It's like we don't need all of that. We don't need three scenes with Frodo talking. We need that one little glimpse, and that can be enough. But
Yep.
it is interesting. I think it's more noticeable in the first act. First with the Frodo scene. Second with I guess with the dwarves coming in to Hobbit Hole
Yep.
is a bit long. And also very like going back to the kitty tone of it. Like the dwarves has come off as being so disrespectful,
Yeah.
like just like absurdly disrespectful. It doesn't like for Bilbo's literally asking them the questions and they're just not answering them. It's not, they're like sometimes like in like a kids movie they can come up with like shenanigans just to lie. They're
Yep.
answering like, oh, like things keep popping up, but there's literally a scene where like Bilbo is with that one guy, the
Yep.
first dwarf, and no one's coming in or anything, and he's just totally ignoring everything he has to say, and it's so it just the dwarves come off as so unlikable in like their first scene that they're in
Yep.
because they're just incredibly rude. And then I'd say like with the dragging out scenes, I think it gets better towards the end.
Yep.
Um, but but also with the trolls, like when they fight the trolls, it's like they fight the trolls in like two different instances, and it's so unnecessary.
Yeah. There's a few. So, again, we want to frame this. The reason why Fellowship works is because Fellowship is kind of two movies.
Yeah,
Fellowship spends an hour and a half developing our 4 or 5 main characters. Frodo, Sam, Merry, Pippin, Gandalf is
yeah,
basically our first hour and a half. And then the next hour and a half is further establishing them while also establishing Legolas, Gimli, Aragorn, everyone. It's
yeah,
this very like really well thought out way to establish the importance of these characters. So then the next two movies where characters are then thrust into the action, you don't have to spend as much time developing them.
yeah.
This movie is right into it. Um, it spends very little time developing Bilbo or Gandalf. And while Gandalf does have some aspects, there's
I
almost
think
nothing
I
to.
think Bilbo is pretty well developed,
I wish they had a
and
little
it's
bit more.
mostly because of Martin Freeman's performance.
Martin Freeman's amazing in this movie.
Yeah, he's even when you go back and rewatch Fellowship, like you can tell like Martin Freeman was like he was paying attention to the way that what's the actor's name who plays Bilbo in the
Ian
first
Holm.
Ian Holm. He's brilliant.
Yeah.
He plays Ash in Alien too, which is
Mm,
great. Ian Holm, like you can tell he like studied like Ian Holm's like dialect and like how he puts emphasis on different words.
yeah.
It's so great. Martin Freeman is fantastic in this movie.
Martin Freeman kind of carries this entire trilogy. I just want to throw that out there.
He carries it until battle when he's like
And then
when he doesn't do anything.
he doesn't do
I
anything.
think Luke Evans carries battle. At
That's
least
a
in my opinion.
bold claim. We're gonna have to get to that because I'm very
Okay.
curious about that. But I don't know because there's so much time spent developing Frodo's relationship with Sam and their relationship with Merry and Pippin, and even Merry and Pippin's dynamic is developed, and you kind of get that built up. But you're right, the dwarf. It's like 5 minutes of movie. Sorry, 10 minutes of movie. 6 minutes of that is a flashback to Frodo.
Yeah.
Um, and then they're immediately thrust into it. And then you're right, the dwarves. I had such an issue with the dwarves in this movie. They do not develop them in any capacity. A lot of them fall into those typical characters of the one aspect, kind of like that's like comedic about them. There's that one dwarf, Keeley, who's kind of like the attractive dwarf,
Yeah,
and
the
then there's
hot one.
the dwarf, and there's that one, the bigger dwarf whose
Bomber.
entire is that his name?
Bomber, yeah. The
That's
one with like
impressive.
the super fat one.
Yeah,
Yeah, and then
but his
there's
entire
Balin, who's like the old wise one.
Yep. And they're
Um,
the only one who's developed is Thorin, and everyone else falls a wayside to this.
yeah,
And that's an issue when you spend 3 movies as to like, we want these guys to get back their mountain,
yeah,
but you don't really like. Nothing's like everything is a tell don't show.
yeah.
They're telling us about this and they're telling us about that, but they're never actually really showing it, and that then
Yeah.
puts the entire movie into question.
And that applies to the plot as well because um, the Fellowship and Unexpected Journey follow similar tonal shifts where the Fellowship of the Ring is like super bright and cheery at the
Yep.
start. You can even confuse it as being a kids movie at the start,
Yep.
but not in like a bad way. But there's like that slight hint of a darker universe. First
Yep.
in the intro, you get the intro with this like the first battle between Sauron and Elrond and the
Yep.
elves and the first and the king and the first men. Not the first men,
It's
like whatever.
it's like the first alliance or whatever.
First
Yeah.
alliance, yes. And so you get that, but you also get Bilbo's like weird obsession with the ring.
Yep.
That's like your first hint of that there's something really dark going on here that you don't quite understand yet.
Yep.
There's also like that relatability factor as well, where you understand Frodo more because like as someone who likes to travel, like I understand what it's like to come with a bunch of your friends and go to somewhere you've never been to before, and you have that
Yep.
camaraderie that you form while you're on your journey, and it's exciting, and you're very enthusiastic, and everything just seems so wide open, and it just perfectly captures that in Fellowship. But in Unexpected Journey, like you can't relate to 12 people coming into my house. They tell me to go somewhere and I have to
Yep.
follow. You can relate to, oh, me and my friends are coming together. We're going to go into some place we've never been to before. And it's going to be, we don't know what we're getting ourselves into, but we're forming a bond because of it. And it's great. And you have that mystery of the ring. You have the mystery of what else is in this universe. But in Unexpected Journey, a bunch of strangers show up in your house and we're going to tell you what the plot is. And it never really, there's no mystery behind it really.
Yeah.
You're told you're going to Moria, and that's to Moria, and that's where you go.
That's a really good point, and I want to touch on that. Is the first movie is that very much. It's that you're right. You establish it's kind of a little bit more because they're in the Shire and things are a little more lighthearted because that's their world. And then there's that weird fascination with the ring, and then Gandalf, the one who in the Fellowship who we've established is this really laid back wizard, is
Yeah.
kind of freaking out a little bit.
Yeah,
And
he's
you're
like,
like,
no,
whoa,
don't give that ring to me
yeah.
because because it'll be trouble.
And you're like, whoa,
Yeah,
what's this? But then they aren't. There isn't this like this lackadaisical like we have to go somewhere. It's this urgent like you have to go.
yeah,
You have to get out of here. And then ultimately like Merry and Pippin joined because they just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time.
yeah.
They just and
Same
it's
with
one of,
Samwise. He was
yeah.
just like
He's like,
listening
hey,
in, and he
yeah,
got caught.
and it's like one of those things where just like it's just it feels much more natural. And it feels like
Yeah,
one of those things like we have and there feels more urgency to it. And this one it's just like they just kind of show up. And again, I know we're talking a lot about the start of this movie, but it's the start of the movie that I think really, at least for me, starts to kind of like this weird, very under like developed and very rushed movie. Despite this movie being 2 hours and 50 minutes long, I was baffled at how little it feels like actually happens in this movie. There
yeah.
is there is like nothing feels like it's accomplished by the end of the movie except for Bilbo's arc. Does that make sense? Does that
I would say it feels like they've made progress. Like on their, it feels like they've traveled for a long time, but
yeah.
nothing really has the significance that Lord of the Rings has.
And
That Fellowship of the Ring has.
And again, we should clarify, we understand they're different things. Lord of the Rings is a story about the world they're in potentially ending. And The Hobbit is the more personalized, we have to get the mountain back.
Yeah, but even in Fellowship, you don't like in the Fellowship, you don't, especially in the start, you don't feel like the world's gonna end. You
No.
know, like it's not really like as the movie goes on, you kind of the larger world
Yeah.
stakes become more noticeable. But I just think like what I just mentioned earlier about the relatability. There's I can personally relate more to Frodo's journey at the
Mhm.
start than I can to Bilbo's journey. And I think that applies to pretty much anyone else.
There's also so my other thing is somehow this world feels smaller and less developed than Lord of the
Yeah.
Rings. And I think a lot of that there's a few things. And again, I'm gonna sound like I'm dogging on this movie a lot. I do like this movie in some capacity. It's one of those things where I can recognize that there are things good, but I'm not the biggest fan of it. But it's a weird, like, I'm very middle of the road on this one. But they somehow, like, in Lord of the Rings in the first movie, it's like you just feel like they've been traveling distances because you get those, like, New Zealand, like, landscapes and they're on the mountains and things are traveling and they're out there in snow. And in this one, they're traveling through CGI woods for a lot of the movie. And
Yeah.
things just feel fake. And it's a weird thing because you could tell they put an emphasis on CGI in this, and that's evident from the fact that the budget of this movie was $180 million, which is a lot. Just want to
Yeah.
clarify if you guys couldn't figure that out. And it feels like a lot of that passion for the world is gone. And I understand Peter Jackson had to really rush this movie because he was brought on last minute. I don't know if you felt that too, but it just really feels like a lot of this movie, a lot of the heart of the Lord of the Rings movies has been like sucked away for kind of
Yeah.
like
We can like fast forward a little bit
yeah,
out of the intro. I think that it feels its length the most when like Radagast shows up and they encounter the orcs riding the wolf
yep,
creatures. Um, that's when I was like, man, this just feels like an extra fight scene just for the sake of having a fight scene.
yep,
Which compare that to like the wolf battle sequence in Two Towers,
yep,
where you can argue that it's filler, but you have like the great character moments. Like
yep,
one of my favorite scenes is when Gimli gets tackled by the wolf thing, and then the orc jumps on top of him and starts to
yep,
kill him. Then Aragorn hits him with an arrow,
yep,
and then he thinks he's safe again. And then the other
yeah,
wolf comes on top of that, and his eyes just go like so wide. Like you get the good character moments, and like you don't get any character moments really in the fight scenes here. Other than the fact that like in the troll scene, like it's funny, oh, like they're incompetent or whatever,
yep,
and then like Bilbo has to like talk the trolls out of eating them long enough until Gandalf comes and shines light on them.
yep.
But
He
it just feels extraneous.
that there's a
I
few things
did
that
like the Rivendell stuff.
the Rivendell stuff is everything with elves in this trilogy is great. I just want to throw
Yeah,
that out there. I love the elves in this trilogy.
yeah,
Um, and but like Bilbo is a weird character because you have to have him have these moments because his arc isn't that he can't accomplish anything. His arc is he's not confident in himself. He doesn't feel like he's, like a kind of like a hero in kind of some capacity. He feels very outmatched. And we get that arc at the end where he stands up for Thorin and kind of stuff like that. And you're like, great, he's come full circle. Bilbo fails consistently throughout this movie. I just want to throw this out there. Until he encounters Gollum, he kind of fails a lot. And that troll scene, if the point of it, like you said, it feels very extraneous because you could use that scene to develop Bilbo.
Yeah.
But you don't because he loses in the end.
Well, I mean, his goal was just to delay them long enough for Gandalf. Because he spots Gandalf creeping around.
But he gets captured at the beginning. He fails.
He does get captured.
And there's no, like, it's one of those things, like, all the dwarves praise him, like, how'd you know? And it's not really, like, it's this weird thing where Bilbo feels like he's very unimportant to these trilogies. Like, and it's one of those things, like, it feels as though his importance is to introduce the ring in this movie.
Yeah, I'd say his importance becomes more relevant in Desolation Smaug, but it feels like in Untitled Chapter that he's like that you don't really get you don't really understand why he's useful yet in this movie. Which I mean, it can be a good lead-in to like the Desolation Smaug. I think maybe Desolation Smaug was a better movie. Maybe we'd be more high on his arc here, but seeing the movie in a vacuum of the trilogy makes it harder to like get into like to enjoy what he goes through in this movie. Because I mean, like, Samwise is pretty incompetent in Fellowship of the Ring.
Yeah.
He's supposed to be Frodo's bodyguard, but he can't do anything. But then by the third movie, he's taking down an entire tower of orcs, and it's awesome.
Yeah.
So
man,
I think
great.
if Return of the King was a dumpster fire, we'd be looking at Fellowship and saying like, why did they bring Samwise? Like, he's clearly can't do anything right.
Yeah.
He almost drowned himself on purpose.
Yeah.
So,
there's a few other things I want to touch in on that. In the Lord of the Rings movies, they make the hobbits feel their kind of size and weight to them. And what by that I mean is, in this movie, Bilbo is an unexperienced combatant and yet is able to like hold his own with the dwarves. And I get you have like but like if you jump ahead to Return to the King, Samwise's moment where he kills the orcs is not necessarily that he's a good fighter. It's his moment of like, I'm standing up and I'm becoming a person.
Yeah.
Bilbo is kind of like this really great soldier, and he feels a lot bigger than I think he is really meant to be. Because in the Lord of the Rings movies, the hobbits feel very like inconsequential. Like, they just feel very outmatched. And
that's why I need the Fellowship to bring them to the Mount Doom.
Exactly.
Because they can't really do anything on their own.
They can't. And like in this one, it feels like Bilbo would be fine making it to the mountain by himself. You're gonna see that more in like Desolation of Smaug, with the spiders in that movie.
It feels like the dwarves are holding him back.
That's exactly what I'm trying to get at. Yeah, the dwarves are holding Bilbo back. Exactly. Man, we just figured this all out.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I just like, again, I fucking love Martin Freeman in this movie, and I love Richard Armitage as Thorin too.
He's a great actor. He plays Dollarhide in season 3 of Hannibal.
Oh wow!
And he plays Dracula in the Castlevania TV show, and he's really great in pretty much everything he is. But I would say that I liked him less rewatching the trilogy. Than I like, especially towards like Battle 5 Armies. Like, I was just like, anytime he's on the screen, I was like, I'm done. I don't care.
We need to get to Battle 5 Armies eventually. I can't wait. I'm not ready for that.
I already got a headache for that. I do like for the dwarves. I like when they sing Misty Mountain Cold.
Oh my god!
It's like, it kind of gives them a little bit of culture, and I think that with that more like childish tone, fairy tale tone, I think it works there. But yeah, I would say that I didn't like the dwarves felt very incompetent in this movie. Richard Thorin felt less likable than I remember, and then by the time the trilogy's over, I hated Keeley like to the bone.
You were just ready for him to die.
Yeah.
I
went, good.
Yes, get stabbed. I don't know. There's a clear difference between this movie, and I feel like you probably agree in some capacity based on your Letterboxd reviews. Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Rings works because it feels like it's a character movie.
Yeah.
Unexpected Journey is an adventure movie, and that's where tonally things start to really fall apart, because Lord of the Rings focuses on characters and Hobbit focuses on spectacle. And that's that. And you're a big fan of the third act of this movie. I could not stand the third act of this movie. I'll be honest.
Oh, let's talk about it.
Yeah, we'll have to eventually really touch on.
What did you not like about? Because I mean, do you want to talk about Rivendell? I mean, we both dislike it.
Yeah, the Rivendell stuff again. I like the
It's
stuff with
fine.
the elves. Yeah, it's
Yeah, and then elf stuff is good.
yeah,
Galadriel. I will say that the one thing Untitled Journey does better than Fellowship. So Fellowship like stands up remarkably
yeah,
considering he's 19 years old, and that's mostly because the character stuff is great.
yeah,
Like the world building, like the costume design,
yeah.
makeup,
Everything,
everything
yeah,
around it
everything.
is phenomenal. But like the Galadriel scene in Fellowship where she goes into evil mode is like
Yeah,
laughably bad. Like I forgot how bad that was.
it's a little awkward.
Like it just feels like they put a Snapchat filter on her face. And she went blah, 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 blah.
You went, oh,
Yeah. So
whoa.
that was really the one scene that didn't hold up to me in Fellowship that took me out of the movie.
Yep.
Um, but I would say like having her back, even though it felt like kind of pointless and extra, it was just nice. I feel like the interactions they had with Gandalf was really good, and like
Yeah.
the dwarves like not like understanding how to eat like salads was pretty
Yep.
funny.
There are a few like so we've always had a big issue with callbacks in movies when they
Yeah,
aren't earned, and in these movies they do feel earned, uh,
yeah.
because they feel more natural because they do feel part of the world. I say it gets less so when all of a sudden Legolas is in a movie, and you're just
Yeah,
like,
and he's
okay,
like, cuck.
yeah, you're like, okay.
It's so sad watching Fellowship of the Ring,
Yeah.
and like he's like kind of like cool and mysterious. He's kind of whimsical too. Like
Yep.
it's funny because in the Hobbit trilogy he played like Orlando Bloom. He's probably told to play this way, but he plays the character like he's so bitter to
Yeah.
everything. He's like this horrible murderer. He just murders everyone relentlessly, and he just hates everything.
Yep.
He's like this edgelord. And then, but then you watch Fellowship, and he's like, oh, you are Aragorn, and you're so cool,
Yep.
and you're like, he thinks everything is so cool, and he's like, so like, he just looks like he's awesome, but like,
Yep.
there's like this whimsicalness about him that you
It's
like
effortless
too.
in Fellowship, and in this one it feels like it's very like calculated to be cool.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
And
that's.
I don't like callbacks are
He's just like everything's like,
Father, I
every
love
terrible
her.
romance scene between Killy and sorry, he's in the background. He's like,
It's like every time he turns around, they're just making out.
yeah.
Hey, I don't know. Legolas is like that one thing that we'll get to that in I guess the other episodes, but the callbacks in this movie feel earned. Things just kind of feel a little bit more earned. I did not like the third act of this movie.
All right, what do you not like about it?
It's the exercise in excess. It's the Man of Steel of Hobbit conclusions.
Whoa,
Yeah.
whoa! I do not agree with that.
Well again, you can't have scenes.
I felt a tumor develop in my brain watching the Man of Steel third act.
You're telling me when they've exploded their 30th building, you weren't excited in Man of Steel?
I was the exact opposite.
There's a few parts. Again, they can't have subject matter that they try to take, like, look, these dwarves could die, and then have them, like, nonchalantly run around. Like, in the Lord of the Rings movies, the orcs feel like a threat. And they feel
Yeah.
like they feel like they are this, like, agent of chaos and destruction, because they are. And in this one, I think they're goblins. I don't think they're actual orcs.
They're goblins.
They're
Yeah.
goblins. They just feel like they're like mean. Like you just like punch them and they just fall over.
Wait, what are they like?
Mean.
Okay.
They're just like that, and there's just like this very weird fat king goblin.
Goblin King?
Yeah, the Goblin King. Yeah, sorry. And he dies. He's like, oh, I guess that will do it. And then he dies. You're like, this isn't funny.
Even when I was younger, I hated that scene.
Yeah, I was like, what is this?
wait, why was he so cool just dying there?
Yeah, he's like, okay. And I was like, okay, cool. But
Yeah.
you just have like, it feels like a roller coaster. And that's the
Yeah.
biggest issue with it, is it's this, it takes away, because Peter Jackson had a lot of this like fluid camera movement, and it was natural fluid camera movement and camera movement, not carrot movement, in Lord of the Rings. And in this one, it feels like a Ready Player One, where you can tell it's a CGI kind of stuff, and it just doesn't feel real. And you just watch them run, and they're just, the goblins just kind of, there's a scene, and I paused it and rewatched it, where they're running off a bridge, and then goblins just standing there going, ha, and like not doing anything, and then they go past, and then he runs after them, and you're like, what is happening here? Like, what is this? Why are they doing this? Doesn't make any sense. They are just what? They're just like, so it just doesn't, it feels like a children's roller coaster, where they're like, all right, now you're gonna go up.
It's like MGM Studio.
Whoa.
And they're like, here comes the goblin.
This is a guy
Now
in a
the kids go,
costume.
and then their
no!"
seats like bump a little bit.
Yeah, you're like, whoa, it feels like that, and they all get out, and then you're like, okay, cool, and then
Okay.
it's just it,
For
like I don't
me
know,
at least, the Goblin Fight feels like the most well realized version of a lighter Lord of the Rings.
I can agree with
Um,
that. I can understand that. I
like
can understand.
when you're told, like when someone tells you, like when you get the vision of like a Hobbit adapting the Hobbit short story with
Not a short
the
story.
novel. It's like it's barely a novel.
It's 300 pages.
Yeah, but the book is like fake.
It's still this is a novel. It's not a
Yeah,
short
maybe for
story.
you, someone doesn't read.
Oh
It's a
my
novel.
god. God damn it.
um, where was I going with this? You made this my point.
It says a book in here. It's because it's calling it a book.
It's
And you said it's a perfectly well realized.
yeah. So it's like when someone tells you that you're adapting the Hobbit movie with the Lord of the Rings movies in mind, and
Yep.
you need to have that lighter tone. This feels like the best version of that.
Okay.
Because you have like the sort of darker fan, like the troll, the goblins aren't like cute. They're pretty like gross looking.
Yep.
But then so I think that works, and it feels like it's taking that Lord of the Rings theme, but going somewhere new because there aren't any goblins. Well, there are goblins in Fellowship, but
Yeah.
you don't get like this type of goblin. I don't think.
Yeah.
It feels like you're going in a newer direction while also maintaining that same Lord of the Rings feel. But you got that more childish part where like the dwarves don't really feel like they're in danger, but it feels fun to me. And like when they have the ladder and they're using the ladder to like block arrows and put the rings in the goblins are going like this to let them
Whoa.
I don't want to rewatch the scene now because I'm thinking myself like on an MGM ride.
Just you should be shaking your tail.
With my 5-year-old son next to me.
Whoa.
And you're like, hey Timmy,
Hey, Timmy.
look out for the goblin.
Look, there's an arrow and move your head.
And Timmy goes, I gotta go to the bathroom.
You're like, no.
I want to play Fortnite.
You have 30 more minutes of this scene. You have to sit through it. I don't like.
You're gonna like it.
You're gonna like it, and then we're gonna rewatch the sequels. Battle of Five Armies MGM ride is just you getting punched in the face 4 or 5 times.
Yeah. they just put earphones.
Yeah.
They put Beats by Dre on your ears, and they just turn on music to the maximum volume, and you can't take off the earphones.
They're Clockwork Oranging you.
Yeah. They're docking you to like bad movies. But I don't know. I don't know. I thought it was fun. Like I can't really change your mind on it, but
yeah, this is one of
the
opinion thing.
It felt whimsical, but also I just like the Lord of the Rings exterior, so I was kind of cool with it. And like some of the props were real. Like it wasn't like a CGI fest like in the Desolation of Smaug, where like where Bilbo's clearly walking around on like just like a CGI screen, a green screen. There are parts of it that felt real enough to me to keep me into the scene.
It had that Avengers Endgame thing where you have that giant battle and occasionally cut to something more personal and they're very clearly on some sound stage and then you cut to a grander one. Yeah, it kind of had that back and forth. I don't. Again, this is clearly like we're not going to change each other's minds. It just didn't work for me. I'm not the biggest fan of a movie that feels like the characters aren't in any danger and there's no sense of like weight or scale to it.
You like Black Hat?
The characters are in danger. He gets shot and stabbed at the end of the movie. Shut up. I hate you. What was I gonna say? Crap. You made me lose train of thought. Now I'm thinking about how great Black Hat is. I don't. There's a few like. I'm very curious because I don't know if you felt this rewatching everything. Even when I wasn't the biggest fan of like this trilogy, and I do like Desolation of Smaug a little bit more than this movie. I know you aren't. I know you are opposite of me on that. There is a certain charm to all of this. Even when I detested moments of Battle of the Five Armies, because I truly detest that movie, there's a certain just charm to it. And it's very weird. And I don't know if it's Peter Jackson. I don't know if it's the world. I could see myself rewatching this trilogy in a few years.
It's probably Martin Freeman.
Is it Martin Freeman?
Yeah, it's probably just Martin Freeman just keeping. But I mean, I'd say Unexpected Journey feels the most like a Peter Jackson movie. Like it feels like he has. I feel like there's essentially played to camera work in this movie. Yeah. It was so crazy going from Fellowship to Battle of Five Armies. I mean, going from Battle of Five Armies to Fellowship.
Yeah.
To watch them in order because it's like there's distinct shots in Fellowship, which just blew my mind because
Yep.
like Battle of Five Armies is a sweeping shot, sweeping shot, sweeping shot. Can't like it was so frustrating.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about the riddles in the dark.
That's probably the best scene in the movie. Like
Yeah,
let's
it's
be
probably the best
honest.
scene of the trilogy, in my opinion.
Yeah. Maybe like the first 5 minutes of Battle of Five Armies has some argument or claim to that. Um, maybe. I kind of
No,
dig the first 5 minutes.
I dig the first 5 minutes of Battle of
Yeah.
Five Armies, but I don't think it's anywhere near as good as
Yeah, this one feels
because
very like
Andy
personal.
Serkis is just incredible. Like
Yeah.
he's just way too good
Can
in
I
the scene.
before we talk about that scene, can we talk about I actually really like the color grading of this movie. Like the sequel movies get very gray and gross, and this
And
one
like
feels
no, they get like too bright.
the third one does. If you
Yeah,
actually like the second one is just like gray and
yeah, okay,
muted. This one actually feels very vibrant and lively. I had to give the movie credit for that. Yeah, the third one is just lit like horribly to hide the
yeah,
bad CGI. But you're right, the riddles in the dark. This is Martin Freeman and this is Andy Serkis at like their like some of their
yeah.
best.
Just acting there like just at their absolute best.
Yeah.
Um, and it's a scene pulled like basically directly. Like I haven't read the shorts the book
Yes,
for a
thank
long
you.
time. The book for a long time, but it seems like it was pretty much taken word for word
Yeah,
from what
it
I remember
basically
from it.
is.
Um,
It's really impressive though, because like the lighting and the setting are all really well done, and it
yeah,
feels it's again, it's a these movies work because they're character movies. These movies
and they
work.
do a good job of like because Gollum. Andy Serkis does a good job of making Gollum both like completely out of his mind while
Yep.
also making him smart at the same time. Like he's able to match Bilbo wit for wit, despite the fact that he's like jumping up and down and like bang fish on rocks and stuff.
Yep.
And it's pretty impressive how he manages to draw that line
Yeah.
of like this creature's clearly just insane, but also there's like some semblance of intelligence still within him.
Yeah.
Um, and like Martin Freeman's like realization where he comes up with the last riddle, like what's in my pocket.
Yeah.
Like his acting's really great there,
Yeah.
and just the way like Gollum keeps like disappearing to the shadows when he thinks he has Bilbo bested.
Yeah.
Um, all that stuff is so good, and especially the writing most of all is just incredible.
Yeah. I completely agree with basically everything. It's ultimately, yeah, you're right. It's probably the standout scene of the trilogy, and I think it's also like the Hobbit movies have a very weird Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings movies, and this is just a Peter Jackson thing, is he loves to cut away from scenes to come back to them. He
Yeah,
does it
because
in
they cut between the troll, I mean the Goblin Fight in this scene, right?
Yep. Yeah, and
Yeah,
it's one of those things I wish they would just let it played out. I wanted like that. I didn't want to go back to seeing like I'm like, oh great, super personal, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh Jesus, because they're running and they're all the goblins are like and they're like throwing stuff, and you're like, okay, cool. And then it cuts back and it's quiet and it's personal. And you're like, my
yeah,
God, it's Gollum. Like, and Gollum just looks better than ever. And you're like, oh my
yeah,
God, this is amazing. Kind of was like a little bit like mixed bag for me, but like on a pure, if you take away all the cuts away, it's clearly the best scene in the movie.
yeah.
Um, I wanted to, before we get to one of my final major complaints about the movie, do you have any other kind of like really good scenes that stood out to you?
Um, and I just want to compare briefly because like just another parallel between Unexpected Journey
Yep.
and Fellowship is that they both go into the mines and fight goblins,
Yep.
and Fellowship does the scene way better. It's just like when you're watching Fellowship and like all these well-defined characters just running through the mines of Moria, like trying to evade goblins, and just
Yep.
feels so like inconceivably epic,
Yep.
and it just works so well.
Yep.
And I like the way that the Fellowship handles um, exposition. So
Yeah.
like they're not really afraid to say this is an exposition scene, which I really appreciate. Like they're pretty honest about it. Like when the Balrog's coming, it could have been Gandalf saying like, "Oh, this is the Balrog," and blah 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 blah. Like he's a super awesome demon, and he's gonna kill
Yep.
us. But then they cut to Christopher Daniel. I mean, Saruman,
Yep.
like describing what the Balrog is. He's like, silly Gandalf, you don't know what you're getting yourself into. And
Yep.
it's like it's so cool. Like it's I can't really explain how it works, but
I
it's
can.
very what?
I can explain because
Okay,
I was skimming through. I was looking up stuff about this movie, and I was looking up kind of like responses and critics and feedback and everything. I was reading a bunch of reviews, and someone I don't know the name of it, so if this is your point, I'm sorry. Um, Someone put out that the reason the exposition in the Lord of the Rings movies work is because it's not directly exposition. A lot of the times, it's kind of like the storytelling, and there's a lot of like emotions like directly involved with it. Like if you think of the opening scene of Fellowship, it's basically like the world was evil and the world was dark, and instead of like back when there was Sauron and things like
Yeah.
that, it's like it's telling a story. And the Hobbit movies don't tell a story. The
Yeah.
Hobbit movies are exposition.
I also think to a certain degree, like you care so much about the Fellowship that you want to know what the Balrog is and how much you want to know how much danger they're about to be in.
Yep.
So when they cut to Saruman giving like the lecture, basically, it's not really it's handled much better than I'm describing it, but you're like on the edge of your seat, like what is this Balrog thing?
Yep.
And so I just want to compare, like I just want to like mention the fact that I think that the goblin scene in Fellowship is handled just way better. And I just want to say it's hilarious that Gimli, like when he walks in and realizes all of his people have been slaughtered, and he has like this huge breakdown, and no one cares.
Yeah,
it's like the funniest thing in my opinion. He's like no,
Yeah,
he's like on the ground, like holding like Balin's body,
Yep.
his uncle's body. It's like
everyone's just like,
everyone's
right.
like we have way more important things to worry about.
Legolas is like picking his teeth in the background. He's like, all right, I'm gonna kill some people. No, that's a perfect segue into my point.
Yeah.
The villains in this trilogy suck.
Yeah.
Villains in this trilogy are downright awful. The main orc,
The pale orc
is a horrible villain. And there's a few reasons why. First off, we'll get to Smaug later on, in the second and third movie. So I'm gonna avoid talking about Smaug. Smaug.
Stupid name.
Can you just imagine, like, do you ever see that video of Benedict Cumberbatch pronouncing penguins? He's like,
Penguins.
Penguins.
Have you seen the video of Benedict Cumberbatch like on like playing Smaug?
Yeah.
In the CGI, he's like.
That's what I was thinking about, and I was thinking like in interviews, like, and you're playing Smaug, and he's like, I was playing Smaug.
Yeah.
He's playing Smaug. Smaug.
Smaug.
Basically, what I was gonna say is they try to give some history between the Pale Orc and Thorin. There is less.
That's in the book too.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
There is less personality with these orcs than there is in one like goblin orc thing in Lord of the Rings. They play
with actors.
That's because they're playing with actors. Yeah. He is just so, and I get Tolkien is very much a good versus evil. Like Gollum's like the closest thing we get to like a middle ground in Lord of the Rings a little bit.
Yeah.
And I get it. He's just so unmemorable. He's just like, there's nothing different or unique about him besides the fact that
all the villains in the Hobbit movies want to eat the protagonists.
Yes.
Yeah. they all want to, the trolls, the Goblin King, Gollum.
Yep.
Not the Pale Orc, but I mean, he probably would eat them if he got the
yeah.
chance. Smaug, they all like specifically state that they want to eat Bilbo or Thorin or any of the main characters at any point in the movie.
It's also one of those things where in the first movie of a trilogy, no one's actually going to get hurt. And it's a very detrimental to try to pose him as like, oh God, we gotta watch out for the Pale Orc. And no, he doesn't pose any threat. Like the Nazgul in Lord of the Rings are terrifying.
Yeah.
They are so well realized. And then you just get this guy and you're just like, okay, cool. And it just feels like it's nothing. It feels like there's just nothing to it. And I can't, like, it's really difficult to rewatch these movies sometimes and know, like, our third movie is going to be the final conflict between this guy. And it's just like, great. I have so much to look forward to.
And then during that last fight scene between the Pale Orc and Thorin, nothing major is going to happen because obviously he's going to come back at some point. And then Bilbo like football tackles him.
Yeah.
But that makes no sense.
It's just, no, he doesn't football tackle the Pale Orc. He football tackles another big giant orc.
A bigger and more giant orc.
A bigger one. He's just like, you're like, all right. But that's the weight and scale. Hobbits are so little. Hobbits, I'm pretty sure, like 4.5 feet.
Yeah. And then going back to the villains, like, we're going to talk about Deathly Smaug and the other ones later, but there's literally a side orc villain that's specifically there just for Legolas to kill him in the last movie.
Oh my God, that's right.
Like, why?
Yeah, they don't even the Pale Orc calls out this bad guy and he's like, "You're gonna hunt them instead." It's like, why? Yeah. What are you doing? You're so much cooler. Yeah,
I know.
This is the score is great. The score kicks ass.
That's the thing is like I think the reason why I like the Goblin Fight is because they played the Misty Mountain Cold, but it's like a drum version. It's like dun 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 dun, and it's so epic. I don't know. I'm a sucker for Lord of the Rings music too, so that probably didn't help.
It's great. I mean, I'm pretty sure. I actually think these Hobbit movies were all nominated for an Oscar. I think every
Probably.
single one of them were. I can look that up. While you're kind of going into, oh yeah, they were. I just scrolled down. Neither was nominated for original score.
Wow. Well, I
Hobbit.
mean, there wasn't. I mean, other than the Mist Mountain Cold song, I can't really think of
That's the
any
thing.
other new songs. But they part of another one of the problems I have is that they only use that song really in the first movie. Like they kind of drop it
Yeah.
after, which is kind of too bad 'cause I really like that song.
So Hobbit: Unexpected Journey was nominated for makeup and hairstyling, production design, and visual effects, and lost all of them. Battle of Five Armies is an Oscar-nominated movie. Just want to throw that out there.
So, well, I mean, Suicide Squad's an Oscar-winning movie, so
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, but Battle of Five Armies was nominated for sound editing. Throw that out there. Yeah, I know, weird. Not even like sound mixing, just sound editing.
that is weird.
That is weird. I ultimately we could spend multiple hours on why the Fellowship of the Ring works, and I feel like there still wouldn't be enough time to cover how just great it is.
Yeah.
And we're doing a very bare minimum jobs. The Balrog is better than anything in this entire trilogy.
I mean, like that's like the most epic scene in the whole movie, in the whole series, and that's the most quotable scene in probably the whole series. Like, you shall not pass.
Yep.
But even like knowing it was coming and rewatching it, like I was so just gripped by
Yep.
it.
Yeah.
It's like rewatching Max Fury Road, where you have like the like when they're going to the sandstorm and then like the tornado comes and it's like like it's like one of those scenes where even when you know it's gonna happen, you just get so caught up in it because of Ian McKellen's performance, because of the limit of like the limited but good use of CGI to give you just like the bare minimum of knowing like the height, just like the distinction and power. It's so impossibly like it's just so incomprehensibly great.
Yep.
And a lot of that's due to the fact that the writing's so good. Like obviously you care about Gandalf so much. And then it's like it's solidified more by the fact that when they get out of Moria, like everyone just collapses and like are just in despair because like their leader basically just died.
Yeah.
They think he's died, and it's like you don't really get that moment of despair in any of the Hobbit movies.
Everything feels very frivolous. Nothing feels. Again, it's very tough because I understand it's more of a children's thing. I understand that's the tone they're going for, but they kind of weren't in the second and third movie. They very much.
But they're not afraid to have orcs that get decapitated. Like you can have one scene of characters being sad.
Yeah, you can have them go. That's the thing, though, is I don't necessarily always condone death in movie for death's sake, so someone can die.
Yeah.
They should have had a death in this movie. They should have had one side dwarf bite the bullet. And I'm not saying that
But the book didn't do that.
But I know the book didn't do that. I get it, but you have to establish stakes, and they don't. And nothing feels very like I needed something. I needed a little bit more. You can't have every
you could have developed Balin as like the wise older dwarf of all of them and have him die.
Just develop the characters more. And that's ultimately like they kill characters in the end of the movie.
Yeah. But it's like, and you can say like, oh well, the Fellowship had 8 characters, but the dwarfs, there are 13 dwarfs, so that you can't make them all well realized. You could have 8 well realized dwarf characters.
Yeah.
At least.
You can have some fall to the wayside.
There's one well-realized dwarf character in Unexpected Journey.
That's it. You can have I would have been okay if there was 4. If they were here's our main 4. Here are 4.
And then not developed this in he has a love interest, but actually developed. Have 2 dwarves with the Fellowship. You have different relationships. You have Merry and Pippin have their own bond, and they're mischievous. But then their relationship with Gandalf is totally different from Gandalf's relationship with Frodo. With Frodo and Gandalf, it's like a father-son or mentor-tutor, mentor-student. But then with Gandalf and Merry and Pippin, it's like they're like his little brothers. Yeah. And Gandalf's Gandalf scolds them when Merry tips over the bucket in the Mines of Moria, and then Gandalf just curses the heck out of him. Yeah. And it's great. And then in Legolas and Gimli, every character has a different relationship with each other character in the Fellowship. What is the one relationship between any of the what is one relationship that Thorin has that's unique with any of the dwarfs?
In the end, in the Battle of the Five Armies, after the end of that movie, I'm pretty sure the guy who's bald and has a beard questions Thorin, but he doesn't do anything.
Nori?
Nori, yeah. He's
Yeah.
like, what? We're letting them die. And he
Yeah.
doesn't do anything. And then Thorin's suddenly better. But that's Battle of the Five. You're right. In this trilogy, they're just like, they try to do the thing where they're the unified dwarves, and dwarves are different from the hobbits, blah, 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 blah. I get it. I get what they're trying to do. It doesn't work in a movie. You can't have 12 characters be a unified thing and not develop them and spend an entire trilogy going like, okay, I guess we should give them their place back. Like, it just,
Yeah.
I don't feel any connection. And I never, even
They each have like one scene where one of them, each dwarf has a scene where they either burp or fart.
yeah,
And the camera, and that's like the
you're like,
character
okay, cool. And then the fat one, like, I've never, this will just spoil a little bit. I have never been so annoyed at a scene when the Desolation of Smog, where the fat guy like busts out of the barrel and is like spinning in circles.
I think it was so awesome when I first saw it in theaters.
So did I.
And I literally rolled my eyes when I just rewatched it.
You're telling me
week.
when he suddenly hits nothing and then picks up 1,000 miles an hour and then keeps rolling and rolling and gets faster and faster.
And then there's just another barrel he jumps into.
Yeah, and you're like, where did that one come from? Because Bilbo didn't have enough barrel to.
I know, that was the whole point.
It doesn't. Okay, I know we're jumping a little bit. Can you hear me? You good?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I want to make sure my audio wasn't. Is my audio good?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, I can kind of like hear a little kickback, but that's good. Yeah, I don't know. We're big character people. We said so in our Dunkirk video. If you've seen that, we were English majors. We went to school for English and everything like that. We very much value well-defined characters.
Yeah.
And when the movie has 2.5, I want to say 2.5.
Yeah.
Gandalf being the
That's
half.
pretty generous.
That's being well. It's Bilbo. It's Thorin. They at least try to develop Thorin.
Gollum. Gollum.
Oh yeah, 3.5. Can I throw out this very hot take?
Sure.
Are you ready? I don't find Gollum as interesting as I think everyone else does.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That is a hot take.
I
disagree.
We'll get to more in that, like when we talk about the Battle of Five Armies and Return of the King.
Yeah.
I don't find Gollum as interesting as I wanted to.
I think I found them the most interesting. My rewatch.
Really?
It's not the most interesting character, but I found him to be the most interesting I've ever found him to be.
Okay,
in my
interesting.
Rewatch. Yeah.
I
have a weird favorite character from the Lord of the Rings series that we'll get into.
Wait, is it in the later movies?
Yeah.
Just throw it out there. We'll
it's Theoden, King Theoden.
Really?
Yes. I was totally like, for some reason rewatching it, I was completely just enamored by his character.
We're gonna have to get to that in Two Towers then. Interesting.
Yeah.
Again, we could beat around the bush in a lot of stuff. Are there any kind of like final points you want to make? Any like lasting comparisons?
Look at my Microsoft sheet that I didn't look at all. I
feel like we touched on I can't believe Battle of Five Armies got a nomination. That's baffling.
Basically covered everything. Yeah.
Yeah, that's again, what we wanted to do here was kind of just review the Hobbit movies and use Battle of the Lord of the Rings movies as a framework, because some of the stuff in this trilogy works, and it admittedly does work, and there is a certain amount of.
I think this movie's like a solid B. Like.
Okay, let's get to grades then. Let's clarify. Matt, we're gonna grade the Hobbit movies like we do in our typically other reviews. We won't do like our favorite scenes, whatever, Black Cat moments, all that.
We kind of like already touched on a lot. Yeah.
What are we gonna give? What do we give this movie?
I'm gonna give it a B.
Wow. Okay.
I have very like. I'm very biased towards fantasy movies, especially like ones that I think this movie has a lot of good going for it. I think that there's a lot of problems towards the beginning, in like the first 2 acts. It's only the first 2/3 of the movie, but I don't know. Martin Freeman kills it for me, and I think that this is like the last Lord of the Rings movie where it doesn't feel like a giant CGI fest, and I feel like there's actually something like that their characters are walking on. And I don't know. I kind of dug like the more whimsical style of it towards the end, like with the goblin battle. And I think the movie has a lot of problems, but I'm willing to overlook that because I really, really, really enjoy Bilbo's story in this.
I'm gonna give the movie a C, and it's kind of one of those things where I do what we do here on Letterboxd. what I do for here, where it kind of grids stuff on a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or an A, B, C, D, F. I try to avoid like the halves because I think this is kind of an interesting way to review stuff. And this movie's closer. If I were to actually give it a letter grade, it's closer to like a 2.5 for me. Again, it just feels one of those things where it feels like an exercise in excess. It feels like a movie that is actively trying to mirror Lord of the Rings style without knowing why Lord of the Rings succeeded in the first place, which is baffling considering it was the same director. I love Martin Freeman in this trilogy. At the time I loved him and I love him now. I honestly, again, I think he's the best part of this entire
He's a
trilogy.
poster in his bedroom.
Just
you just stare at.
Ignore over there. It's just six posters of Martin Freeman as he's after the Hobbit movies. Like I go and I find him, I take photos of him. Yeah. That's legally not true. Just throw that out there. I think this movie works on some regards. I think a lot of the score and a lot of the spirit at times is back in the movies. And again, I think this movie is very pretty to look at times. Again, this movie is very like scene by scene kind of aspect for me. And then other than that, I don't know. I struggle with a lot of this movie, and I don't know when I rewatch this stuff if I'm gonna rewatch this movie. I might just go right to Smaug and just go, okay, I know what happens before and after that, which is different from you because I know you're not the biggest fan of Smaug, and everything like that.
But also, there's one more interesting question: is why make these movies 3 hours long if you're strict? Like, do you think these movies could be better if they were 2 hours long?
It's money.
But you're not. You're wasting more. You're spending more money making the movie an hour longer. Like, are like Lord of the Rings fans really gonna be turned off by the movie? It's only 2 hours long. Like, oh, this isn't 3 hours long. I'm not gonna watch it. It's like you're extending the shortest book of the Lord of the Rings series into the trilogy. Yeah, exactly. And then you're like one Lord of the Rings book is bigger than that.
Yeah.
Book, and it equals one movie pretty seamlessly. Other than Tom Bombadil, no one cares about Tom Bombadil. Except for the super diehard Lord of the Rings fans. But if you're going to purposely stretch this movie, this small book, a novella, if you will, to a trilogy, why would you insist on making each of those movies 3 hours long?
So, there's an original report when these movies first came out, after that, Peter Jackson wanted to end the first movie where the second movie ended. Where he wanted the end of the first movie to be where Smaug breaks out and is going to go burn Lake Town. And if we're going to put it into two movies like that, I think if you make it 2.5 hour movies, make it the end of the first movie, and then you can spend time developing the characters and stuff like that. I think it works.
There's 3 2-hour movies. You want to make it a trilogy, 3 2-hour movies. Yeah. And then you're getting all the money. You're getting all the money of a trilogy while spending less money on 3 extra hours of content.
And then do the thing, because there are extended versions of this movie, but we should really clarify. We should have clarified at the beginning. We were watching the theatrical versions of all of these.
Yeah.
Matt and I are not very good with movies that extend past 3 hours. To say that we actively try to avoid them might be an understatement.
Yeah.
We are the
I'm still dreading having to watch the new Bond movie.
So am I.
Pretty much every day I think like I'm gonna have to see this movie in theaters.
Yep.
And that's like gonna be like a year from now, but I'm still dreading it.
So actually, I think it might eventually come to, because Wonder Woman's now gonna be on HBO Max.
Yeah.
So it might eventually, but
I hope so. I hope it just comes on to.
It's one of those things like I watched The Godfather for the first time last night. I'm like, great, it's The Godfather. And what actually hesitated me from stopping it is I looked up the runtime for it, saw it was almost 3 hours, went fuck, and went, okay, sure, why not? There's a 40 minutes of added time to The Unexpected Journey, and a lot of it is developing the characters. It's baffling because a lot of times establishing before they go off on their journey. I'm pretty sure a lot of time is spent, from what I remember reading, with the dwarves.
Yeah,
that's what we need in this movie. That's what makes this trilogy
cut out the pointless fight scene with the orcs on riding the wolves. Cut out
Radagast.
Yeah, cut out Radagast. Cut out the rock monsters fighting for no reason.
Oh, that's right. That was weird. That was I kind of dug that a little bit.
It looked cool, but like if you're gonna replace it with a scene of character development, put the scene of character development in there. Yeah, that's pretty weird.
Yeah,
it's like the studio didn't think that It's like this. It's like you can just see the studio influence there.
Yeah, and that's
It's so sad.
that's the
Yeah,
biggest difference is between these movies is one is a passion and love for the material, and the other one is a studio project. And I think that's the biggest difference between the two trilogies, and what ultimately will cause the Hobbit to I feel like fall to obscurity.
yeah,
The only reason the Hobbits haven't fallen to obscurity is because they're tied. It's a Lord of the Rings world movie.
yeah.
If these were any other singular trilogy of fantasy movies, they would be lambasted and forgotten to time. But
Yeah.
because we go, oh, that's right, the Lord of the Rings movies are great. I guess I'll also watch the Hobbit movies too. And that's kind of
It'll be
feels like
interesting to see like in like 15 years, 20 years from now, like when kids are like when they're like in middle school, elementary school, and they want to watch Lord of the Rings, and they'll even know about the Hobbit movies. They'll even
yeah,
care.
yeah.
Like
It's
we
very
know
interesting.
because because we saw them come out in theaters, so like we know
Yeah,
that they exist. But like if we don't have that incentive to watch them in theaters as
yeah,
well, and who would care by that point?
yeah. I was what Return Revenge of the Sith came out in 2005.
Yeah,
And like that was like my first major movie in like like that big like
yeah.
oh man
Like
so I
did you
was
know
just
Did you know that Silence of the Lambs has a sequel, Hannibal?
yeah with Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah, but like Julianne Moore plays Clarice.
Yeah, I've heard about it. I've heard it's
Yeah,
okay.
like the thing, it's like I didn't know, like I never, like I watched Silence of the Lambs, like I didn't know that there was a sequel to it. I for the longest time just viewed Silence of the Lambs as like its own movie.
But the thing is
So like,
though, there's a difference I feel like between a cultural impact of Lord of the Rings and Silence of the Lambs and the Hannibal kind of like world. Lord
yeah,
of the Rings is massive. And that's an understatement too. These things are like Roger Ebert, our great Roger Ebert, when he agrees with us, is basically it's kind of like it's cultish at times. And it's okay to recognize like, hey, these movies aren't perfect. Movies
do you have any flaws with Fellowship of the Ring?
No, it's my favorite. It's my favorite Lord of the Rings ones.
Okay.
I would say there's like some goofy stuff, and um, I would say the introduction of a lot of our secondary main characters, Legolas, Gimli, and Aragorn, is just kind of just happens.
They're just there
They're just
in
there, and
Rivendell.
you're like, okay, cool.
Yeah,
There's also a lot of like in Fellowship. There's a lot of like potential tension, which is like what's it called? Tolkien's take on kind of like racism in some regards between the elves and the dwarves. It's not actual racism. It's just kind of like that class thing, a species thing or whatever. Um, and they always hint at that, but it always just feels very tame. And like he's always like shying away from the reality that they probably hate each other.
yeah.
Um, in Hobbits, they actually touch on that more, and they try to give more like, "Look, you abandon our people," stuff like that. And you're like, "Okay,
Mm.
cool, I actually get it." I feel yeah. In Lord of the Rings Fellowship, the probably the worst part about it for me is the very awkward transition from the first half of the movie to the second half of the movie. Like the actual announcing and everything in Rivendell in Fellowship feels very like awkward.
So like, this is the real movie now. This is the real plot.
This is the
Yeah,
yeah. It's basically going like now this is what matters, and it's like
yeah,
okay, cool. I just wish you would have done it a little more naturally because everything else feels natural.
yeah.
And again, I'm not the biggest fan of cutting away from stuff to show other stuff. I'm never in movies. It's not my favorite thing. And Peter
I
Jackson,
always like that. I don't know
you
why.
always do.
Yeah.
What about you? Is there anything you don't like in Fellowship?
I think that the beginning is a little slow.
Okay.
Just gonna. Other than that, I don't know. I had to like because I've read the book, and it's
Yep.
just the fact that they were able to put this into a comprehensive movie is just a feat. Let alone an Oscar winning movie is
Yeah.
just a feat in itself.
Can we?
Yeah,
What would you rank? Can we do our quick brief rankings of the
yeah.
Lord of the Rings trilogy and the Hobbit movies? Lord of the Rings, Matt. What are you putting for fourth to 2 to 1?
And I think wait, yeah, Two Towers is my favorite.
Wow, really
Yeah.
interesting. Okay.
Um, I think Two Towers, Return of the King, Fellowship, but it's like there's such a small margin between them
Yeah.
all. It's like the smallest margin possible. I
Yeah.
don't know what are yours?
Mine's Fellowship is number 1, Return of the King, Two Towers. But again, if one day I might wake up, I might rewatch these again and go, yeah, Two Towers is the best, or Return of the King
Yeah,
is the best. You're right. They're like half of a
they're
percent.
better as a unit.
They are better as a unit.
Best.
What would you rank the Hobbit movies?
Unexpected, Desolation of Smaug, Battle of Five Armies.
Man, you really had a bad experience then after the first one.
Yeah.
Mine would be Smaug, Unexpected, Battle of Five Armies.
Okay.
Yeah, that's I think this is really fun, and I'm excited
Yeah,
to see how our opinions change. Battle of the Five Armies, just that video is just gonna be us yelling at the screen.
it's gonna be a mess,
It's gonna be a mess.
especially because uh, the final battle in Return of the King, from a CGI standpoint, is even better
Yeah,
than Battle of the Five Armies.
it's perfect. It's perfect in every regard. So yeah, that was our first part of our Why the Hobbit Works and Doesn't Work series, the Hobbit Trilogy, whatever we're gonna call it. We'll figure out a more succinct title or something like that. But Matt, what is our call to action? What are we watching
Um,
next? What are we doing next?
like, comment, subscribe, comment your favorite, rank your Lord of the Rings and Hobbit movies for
Yeah.
us if you're watching. Let us know what you think of the series. If you like this discussion, we're going to be doing 2 more episodes. So if you want us to talk on anything specifically, let us know.
Yeah.
You can find us on YouTube,
We're probably watching
iTunes,
this.
Spotify, anywhere you listen to great, amazing podcasts. And then this weekend we'll be doing Cold War, the 2018 film. So look out for that. And then we'll be doing Mank next week, the Fincher movie.
Yep.
And after that, westerns. So watch a ton of westerns,
Yeah.
so you can talk with us about those too.
Yeah.
And then, but more of these Hobbit, Lord of the Rings movies will be coming out as well.
Yeah. We'll probably try to aim for one every week. We might try to record a bunch. We might try to wait a week to actually record the next one just to see kind of like feedback and what we think about it. Because, like we said, we have to try to compare Return of the King to Battle of Five Armies, and we have to try to structure that in some way, which isn't us yelling about how like unimportant each like the Return of the Five Armies, Battle of Five Armies, like
Battle of the Five Kings.
Battle of the Five Kings. Ooh, that'd be interesting. I just watched what's it called? I just watched Godfather. So yeah, Battle of Five Kings, Battle of Five Families, just not out there. Yeah. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you guys on after recording this. I don't know when this will go up, but yeah, we'll see you guys for Cold War. All right. Also, comment your favorite film fraud. And Mark is no longer allowed, even though he is. But you know, he's not here, so he can't say anything. So yeah. All right. Thank you guys for watching. I gotta find